Oh, oh, ॐ श्रीगणेशाय नमः। ॐ श्रीसरस्वत्यै नमः। ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। सदाशिवसमारम्भाम् शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयम् करुणालयम् नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करम् लोकशङ्करम्। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयम् नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैः तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितौ यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Can you get introduced to Neeraja ji? Can you remove the summary slide for now and make it full screen? Hari Om Neeraja ji, are you there? Then Raghu ji, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hari Om, my name is Raghuveer Rao. I've been attending these classes for the last couple of years. This is my fifth class. And apart from that, I attend the Bhagavad Gita class at the DC Center. And I also attend the Vivek Chudamani class on Thursdays at the DC Center. And I
Shanti mantras at the beginning of every Upanishad, in fact, at the beginning of every auspicious activity, are meant to provide a temporary abeyance to the hurdles which will derail our acquisition of the knowledge. These hurdles are reaching us because of our past karmas, not necessarily in this Janma, but it could be in many previous Janmas. And once these hurdles are temporarily set aside, and then the mental proximity between the Guru and you, which is what is very important, at that time, this knowledge flows freely. From a student's perspective, we saw that tapas, brahmacharya, and shraddha in a Vedantic context is different from the normal tapas, brahmacharya, and shraddha that we are aware of. Tapas is to constantly be close to the Guru and listen to the knowledge continuously, uninterrupted. Brahmacharya is to remain focused on this knowledge of Brahman and attaining that realization. Shraddha is to have faith in the Guru and the Upanishads. So they all have a special meaning when it comes to Vedantic journey. We also saw that the first of the students, after 1 year of staying with his Guru, posed a question about beings in general, the sentient beings that are around us. His question was, how are they created and how do they propagate? The response from the Guru, Sage Pippalada, says that one who has gained the position of Hiranyagarbha because of his past karma and recalling the Vedic knowledge, decided to inquire into how progenies can be propagated. Perpetuation of a progeny. Now, when we say Hiranyagarbha, we have to understand it is Brahman associated with the total cosmic mind, which is the subtle material in creation. So, this step that we are talking about is that which is subtle has to become gross, and that which is gross has to propagate. And the question was how to do that. So the first pair that was created was termed as, in English we would call it consumer and consumed. Somebody to consume something and something to be consumed. The term consumer and consuming has got a very broad understanding in Vedantic. We can say energy and matter because energy consumes matter and matter is created out of energy. Or we can say life principle and inert, sentient and the non-sentient. The sentient people are the ones who can actually visualize the insentient things. Insentient things cannot know them by themselves. Somebody has to tell it is there, then only it is known. Correct? Or we can also say that perceiver and perceived, that which is known and that which is knower. All these meanings combined together is consumer and consumed, not just one of them. Because depending upon the context, we'll have to supply the appropriate meaning and understand what is being told in the Upanishad or what is the progress of thought within the Upanishad. So you will find in Upanishad this challenge that we do not know what is the context in which a phrase is occurring, and if we take a general meaning of that word, we will be totally misled. That is why we require Guru. Because the thought flow of the Upanishad is visible only to one who has already realized the truth. When we have not realized the truth and we try to understand how Upanishad is progressing, we don't know. We are always misled or we go around in circles. From the primary concepts, which is energy and matter, all that is perceived in this world came to be. But that coming to be is called a materialization. That which was conceived of in the mind becomes a reality when it becomes hard substance. I have a plan to build a house and I use the raw materials around me, then the house materializes. So this creation of something gross from something subtle is just a mere materialization, meaning adding material to a concept. And even in this materialization, you will find that the pairs continue. Those which are independent seem to exist on their own, and those which are dependent on the independent things around them, like the sun and the moon, etc. Self-effulgent or secondary effulgence. Sun is self-effulgent and moon is secondary. Sentient and the insentient. In this particular Upanishad, all this is identified as the sun principle and the moon principle, just to convey the message. The pervasive nature of the prana, which is also known as energy, which is also identified as the sun principle, etc., etc., it was explained that this prana does not stay in one place and the rest of the inert matter is surrounding it, like we have an atom and the electrons are going around it. It said, no, this prana is actually pervasive. Even amidst the secondary, non sentient, that which can become effulgent by borrowing the sentiency or effulgence from a primary source, all of them together are pervaded by that which is sentient. So the sun principle does not just remain as sun somewhere, but actually the sun principle is both the globe that is glowing, which we see in the sky, and its light, which is giving us energy in us today. Both put together is the principle of prana. So prana has got two states. One as an identifiable concept, and then an all-pervasive truth that is manifesting. So this principle called prana interacts with a principle called matter, and depending upon the combination of those two, we get variety in life. Some of them wonderful creations in this world. For us to visualize that, we'll have to do some kind of introspection and for a moment forget that we exist, and we have to conceive of this entire world of just an interplay of energy and matter. And how do we tie all of this together with Brahmanyanam? Today's session at the end, I'm going to take you through some contemplative concept, very deep, but we'll see how it goes anyway. So the pervasive nature of the sentient Prajapati and the non-pervasive nature of insentient Prajapati is just to say that in time and space, something is all pervasive, and in time and space, something becomes gross, solidified, and available only at a specific location. Now, when this subtle, all-pervading thing becomes gross, it gets limited. And when we, the subtle, all-pervading truth, get identified with the gross body which we possess, we become limited. Nothing magical in it, it's just an association. The moment I say I am this BMI, I'm limited, finished. And the moment I can say that this BMI is also an extended part of me, I am the all-pervasive truth, there is a mental shift in our thinking. Not that it has got any practical effect, but the shift happens. For 1 second, when I used the word that you are all pervasive, all of us became all pervasive in that second. But again, then our identity with our BMI will pull us back into our limited understanding. So we actually divide this knowledge into two parts. One part, which is the firm conviction that I am this BMI, and the other part is I'm gaining some knowledge which is supposed to liberate me from this limitedness. The funny thing is, we think the knowledge has to work on us like maths, physics, and chemistry and enhance my limited understanding and then become an infinite being. But look at the paradox that both limitedness and infiniteness are opposite words. Can something be limited when it is infinite? It cannot. So, our ability to push that concept into our limited understanding of ourselves generates a lot of friction within us. All that we know up to this point will conflict with what we are being told now. This friction manifests as questions when you start accepting the truth of the infinitude of your nature. But when you do not accept that infinitude, this entire thing exercise goes through as a mere exercise in maths, physics, and chemistry, and now we added Vedanta to it also. Luckily, our Guru Parampara has made two great things for us. One is giving us this knowledge in the form of Upanishad, and Mahatmas have translated in a language which we are currently familiar with. None of us, as he said, are aware of Sanskrit to the depth that is needed, and yet Swami Chinmayananda brought this knowledge to us in a words, in language which is familiar to us. So, all that is creation, which consists of that which is manifested, which is visible as something that is sentient or something which is insentient, and all that is yet to be manifested, which is conceived of as a thought, which is just a subtle thinking, together, he says, is only matter. And when it is acted upon by the sentiency principle called prana in this particular Upanishad, there is an energization of that around it. So he says everything is matter, but in association with this prana energy, this matter as though becomes energetic. So that is how we see I am talking, you are listening, we are all writing down, we are all understanding, we are all grasping. All this is enlivening of the matter which forms us. This excitation of this BMI because of the presence of prana is a natural thing that will happen. It's just the effect of them being together. Just like you put a crystal and put a red cloth near it, the red cloth's reflection will come on the crystal. Nothing fantastic about it. Science goes to a point and says that entire matter and its excited state of realization, everything is only a material property and has nothing to do with the prana element. They say everything is created by itself. There's no special feature required. Vedanta disagrees, saying that just like unless you have electricity, even a computer which is a supercomputer or artificial intelligence cannot act on its own. Therefore, Vedanta postulates that the underlying principle should be something which is existing, which has got that ability of knowledge, ability to understand, ability to create, ability to do everything. And that is why Ishvara is postulated as that in Vedanta. And all this concept that there is a sentient part of creation which pervades through the energy, and there is an insentient part which is consumed by this sentient part, is provided in the Rig mantras, which we saw as Surya Upanishad and Akshay Upanishad, which identifies the sun's principle in an abstract term to say that it is all pervasive, not just a globe standing somewhere ideally. This much we covered in the last session. Now let's move forward and see how this Upanishad unfolds today. Next slide, please. So we have covered the question. We saw the first pair in creation, which is energy and matter. And then we also saw the second pair, which is luminance and borrowed luminance, sun principle and the moon principle. And now we're going to look at time and activity, which is the third pair that first Upanishad unfolds. That is from mantra 1.9. Can you click there, please? Yes. संवत्सरो वै प्रजापतिः तस्य अयने दक्षिणं च उत्तरं च तदेह वै तदिष्टापूर्ते कृतामित्युपासते. ते चान्द्रमसमेव लोकमभिजायन्ते त एव पुनरावर्तन्ते तस्मादेते ऋषयः प्रजाकामा दक्षिणं प्रतिपद्यन्ते एष हवैरैर्च पितृयाणः. Actually, this mantra is a giant leap from what was so far flowing very slowly. The Upanishad takes a big jump. It introduces two concepts. One is the concept of time, and then it also introduces the concept of what is activity in time. Both are implied in this Upanishad. Let's see a little bit deeper into this mantra to understand what is being talked about. Next slide. Samvatsaraha, the whole year. Why? Verily, Prajapatihi. Prajapati, the Lord of creatures. Tasya, his, ayane, two paths. Varteta, exists. Dakshinam, the south, cha, and Uttaram, the north, cha, and Tat, therefore, ye, who, Havai, as is well known or verily so, Tat, that, Ishtapurte, Ishtam cha Purtim cha is the compound word there. The performance of Vedic sacrifices and doing such philanthropic work such as digging wells or tanks for public, etc. This is how the term is to be understood. Kritam, work worth performing, or work which gives permanent value. Iti, thus, upasate, do devotedly. Te, they, Chandramasam, the lunar, eva, verily, lokam, world, abhijayante, attain, conquer, they, te, eva, verily, punaravartante, return again, tasmat, therefore, ete, these rishayaha, rishis, who are prajakamas, desiring progeny, dakshinam, the southern, pratipadyante, they go along the southern path. Esha, this Havai indeed is well known as Raihi, matter, Yaha, which Pitriyanaha, the path of the mains or path of the forefathers. So, to understand the literal meaning, this mantra says the year indeed is Prajapati, and there are two paths, the southern and the northern. Those who follow the path of karma alone, by believing that karma will get everything for them, by the performance of Vedic sacrifices or noble activities, they only obtain the world of the moon, meaning they are going through the path of material gains and others. And certainly, they do return again. That means this path is not a permanent solution to them. They are going to come back again into this cycle. Therefore, those sages, meaning Rishayaha, who have actually started this progeny process, they want to return. They believe that karma is important. So they will desire offsprings to perpetuate this path, and they therefore take the southern route, and this route is merely the material route. It is a materialistic pursuit. And it is also known as the path that has been followed by our forefathers. So this is what this mantra is telling, that there are people who like this and who actually pursue this. But this is a cyclic journey. Continuously, you are in a perpetual machine. It will keep on producing new things for you, and you will keep on enjoying it or suffering it, and then you will never come out of the cycle. A good example for that is like a wheel which they have in a laboratory, and they put a mouse on that step. It is believing that it's actually climbing up each step, but what is really happening is going round in circles again and again, like that. So, this journey of perpetuating oneself through progeny, through activities, is not a permanent gain. It is going to be a cyclic gain because you'll come back to where you started every time you pursue this path, is what this mantra is trying to tell. So we'll have to understand it a little bit more deeper to find out how that meaning comes out. So let's move to the next slide. See, when you say creation, so far we saw that only the principles were created. But creation is also synonymous in time because of one factor. When you say something is created, then you are actually perceiving a change from unmanifest to manifest, from one thing to another, etc. Right? Joining or destroying, all this is change. And whenever you have change, time is the field in which such a change can operate. Time is a concept only when you have two things. So when one thing changes from one state to another, then time element enters into the equation. When there is no duality, time does not exist. Now, in order for us to grasp this concept that when there is no duality, time does not exist, the best example which any one of us can take is sleep. What happens when we go into deep sleep? Nothing exists, correct? Yes, no, not? Okay. In deep sleep, actually, even our own existence as this BMI does not exist. So everything has been merged into one single entity called deep sleeper, right? And a deep sleeper does not know time. Only when he wakes up, he realizes he slept for X hours, correct? And nor he is having any dreams to say that he is still active, but he is appearing to sleep. It's actually real deep sleep where nothing exists except he. The fact that we wake up in our waking world and not in somebody else's waking world tells us that I am the one who went into deep sleep, where I became one with everything and nothing existed other than me, and there time stopped. So, whenever you have two things, time will be there, and whenever there is one alone, no time will be there, right? Because when we wake up, we come into this observer and observe, and change will come into being, and change is measured, and therefore time is evident. So the moment Prajapati decided he will create a pair, he has already put the seed for time into place, correct? Because when he created two, there's going to be some effect between them, and therefore change will be there, and that change has to be measured. So time concept had crept in even at the first section of the pair. But it manifests only when the sun and the moon start interacting and you start getting this effect of its rotations. The interplay between Rai, the matter, and Prana, the energy, results in the change or modification in both Rai and Prana. That which is observed has now changed itself to include what is observed, and that which is observing also has changed to include that it has observed something. Like if all of you are listening to me, can you say you have not changed? You have changed from not listening to me to the state called you listen to me. So even this mere observing me has changed you. And since I have been heard, I have now come into existence in all of your minds as one who is speaking, correct? So I have changed from my individual unobserved state to an all observed state through all of you. Even the simple exercise we are doing of actually seeing each other has changed both of us. I, who was not known, is now known to many. And those who did not know me now know me. Both of us have changed. So this change happens the moment two things start interacting. And because change is there, it has to be measured. The rate of change will be varied. Some of you know me more intimately because of more frequent associations with me. Some of them, or some of you are meeting me for the first time and you're forming your impressions now. So the more you start interacting with me, more frequently you will be in touch with my thinking process. And more of you will become part of me, and I will become part of you also. Not in the sense of a physical Ram Mohan. I'm talking about the conceptual Ram Mohan and the conceptual you. This is what we call as perception of change. Each observed and the observing both are undergoing changes as they come into play with each other. And every change that we see in this world is just an extension of the interaction between the Rai and Prana principle, nothing else. We can never claim any right to any knowledge that we have. Our brain cells, in the presence of a book of Upanishad, will respond. But if that response is not constant, then it dies by itself and nothing else happens to it. And when there is a constancy of that contact with that knowledge, then it starts producing effects in us. This is indicated by the term Samvatsaro Vai, meaning a year is a unit of time in the solar scale, and that effect of this change in its rate also is Prajapati. So now, observer, observed, and the new term that has crept into our understanding is the process of observing, which has got a time element in it, the rate at which we are able to observe. All three put together is only Prajapati, is what the Upanishad is trying to tell us. It started with a pair, but implied in the pair is the interaction also. The third term is being introduced in this particular mantra. In Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Krishna says, Kalau Kalayatamaham. In the 10th chapter, 30th mantra, he says, I am time. The beginningless is divided into past, present, and future by the play of the mind and intellect. That is why in deep sleep, when the mind is not available, we don't know our past, we don't know our future, nor are we aware of our present. And that happens naturally. And you can do the same thing in meditation. When you actually sit and meditate and you force your mind to stillness, you will reach that same stage of beginninglessness, which doesn't have a past, doesn't have a present, and it doesn't have a future. But how long you sustain it will depend upon how much your leaning is towards being in that state or coming out of it and engaging into material pursuits. The Lord is an infinite substratum that is supporting all this multiplicity. So, in this mantra, time, which is called Prajapati, is measured with reference to the sun principle. It could have taken anything, but for the continuity of thought, the Upanishad uses a sun principle. In the next mantra, it will talk about the moon principle also. We'll see that later. Okay. Next slide, please. Kritam iti upasate. See, at the individual level, this interaction between Rai and Prana actually manifests as karma. That energy in you interacting with the matter outside of you is actually a karma action. And whenever you do that action, as I said, both the karta is influenced by the action and the object of action, which is the world outside, is also affected by action, which is known as results. So in our life, when we act, we produce two results. One, an internal result which only is exclusively for us, and an external result which affects the world around us. Now, the Upanishad continues with the postulation that there are two paths for the jiva, moksha and karma marg. If I believe that the internal results that I would like to have is the only important thing in my life, and I don't care about the world outside, that becomes a selfish karma mark. The Upanishad is not talking to such people because these disciples who have reached sage Pipalada are already aware of what is dharma and everything. So the Upanishad continues with the postulation that for a person who is dharmic, there are two paths: path of karma, which is dharmic karma marga, and a path of moksha, which is liberation, path of energy and path of matter. Typically, karma takes four directions, depending upon the purusharthas which we discussed in the first session, which drive the jiva towards various activities. What are the four purusharthas which is kama, desire, artha, money, wealth, dharma, the righteousness, and moksha, which is liberation. The students who have reached sage Pipalada have already overcome the impulse for taking to Kama Marga or Artha Marga. They don't have no longer any interest in fulfilling desires and going after money, etc. Not that they are not going to use the money or not have any desire to eat and all, but they will limit it to only what is essential for keeping this body going. And their focus is on something higher. The Guru is now telling us what is the difference between those who have already taken to this path and the rest by saying, for those who have taken to this path of Vedic life have got two options: either follow Dharma or follow Moksha. And the Moksha Marga is the northern path in this particular Upanishad, and Dharma Marga is the Dakshina path or southern path. Within the Dharma Marga, the Upanishad postulates two kinds of activities: Ishta and Purti. Ishta refers to the daily obligationary duties that one has to do. It is ordained in the scriptures. And Purti refers to special services done for public welfare. One is for fulfilling one's needs, another to do a social service, a service for the society, the world around you. One is focused on gaining inward, another is focused on making sure the world outside is benefited by your presence. In modern parlance, we would call them as compelling duties that we have to do and noble pursuits which will benefit the world at large, philanthropic activities. Both are covered by Ishta and Purti in this Upanishad. So if you look into this Upanishad, it is actually deeper than what we see or read at the facial level. Next slide, please. The mantra is asserting the results of what we can gain by pursuing either Ishta, which is Vedic way of life, or Purti, which is noble pursuits. The results all belong to the realm of matter, and therefore it is not permanent. In other words, material gains. That is why Upanishad says, Chandramasameva lokam abhijayante. They actually gain. Materially, they will gain more, but more material gain is not permanent. In this mantra, by pointing out Ishta and Purti, subtle realms of heavenly abodes, which is the world itself has got higher worlds, which is called as Bhuvar, Suvar, Mahar, Jhana, Tapa, and Brahmalokas. We all have read it in Puranas, right? Those 6 worlds outside are subtle worlds. And Bhuloka is the gross world in which we have experiences, gross experiences. So this Upanishad says that if you want some Bhuloka gains in this world, you start doing social service. Then everybody will start returning favors to you, unasked. So if you do know many philanthropists from these trading community, they used to do that. They would build chowtries, they will build dharmashalas. There are people who donate money for the pilgrims who are going to Haridwar. We have seen that. All of them are doing this, what is known as Purti. karma. And there are these Vedic pundits who keep on doing havans and making sure that the welfare of the world is taken care of. They are also doing such purti functions. And there are people who are doing Ishtakama Purti. That is, their own personal desires are first taken up. I want to do a yajna to propitiate Lord Ganesha. I want to do a Navagraha Homam in my home. You're doing it for your own gain. But both of them, whether you do it for the world outside or you do it for your own internal BMI, both of them, even if it is meant for the life afterwards or the life now, all of them are impermanent. Because as long as the punya you gain from those activities protect you, you will enjoy. The moment that punya is exhausted, your visa status for that is completed, so you have to come back. Start all over again and start building another set of application forms. Prajakamaha dakshinam pratipadyante. Why do we actually do this or that? Here, the broader classification of what is the driving force behind our activities is pointed out in this mantra. It says, driven by the desire to perpetuate one's identity through progeny, those who take the path of dharmic or Vedic action will go to the world of the ancestors. This is what many have been doing, and we also will continue to do that. That is called Pitriyana, the path of the ancestors, which is known as southern path in this Upanishad. And this is symbolized by the moon, Rai principle, which is matter or moon, or all that insentient, everything, whole chain of thoughts must be in our mind when it says moon. The key message from this is Punar Avartante. Punar means again, Avartante, they come back. They always return back to their starting point. It's not a permanent solution. Can you go back to the master slide, please? Take at the bottom. So, pair 3 was a vision of time, and activities were classified into two categories. Now, we saw that amongst the activities of high and low, one who has a lower vision will actually go into further activities of month and day activities. Once you have got a vision at the broad level that I would like to fulfill my desires, I want noble things to happen to me, pretty much your mindset is driven towards the pair 4, which is the bottom blue box at the bottom left. That is, the lower vision will drive you into activities which you do on a day-to-day basis. But if you have this higher vision that I would like to come away from the cycle of life and death, what should I do? The next mantra 1 and 1.1 and 1.10 and 1.11 will explain that. We'll go into that. Can you click the red box, please? It is called higher vision. अतोत्तरेण तपसा ब्रह्मचर्येण श्रद्धया विद्यया आत्मानम् अन्विष्य आदित्यम् अभिजयन्ते एतद्वै प्राणानाम् आयतनम् एतदमृतम् अभयमेतत् परायणमेतस्मान् पुनरावर्तन्त इत्येष निरोधः तदेषः श्लोकः. Upanishad says, Atha again, Uttarena by the northern path, Tapasa by austerity, Brahmacharyena by self-discipline, Shraddhaya by faith, Vidhyaya by knowledge and meditation, Atmanam, the Atman, the self, Anvishya, having sought, Adityam, the sun, Abhijayante, attain, Etad, this sun, why verily, Prananam, of all the pranas or energy, Ayatanam, abode, source, Etat, this Amritam, immortal and imperishable, Abhayam, free from fear, Etat, this Parayanam, supreme resort, Etasmat, from the sun, Punaha, again, Na avartante, do not return, Iti, thus, Eshaha, this northern path, Nirodha is the end. Literally, it's a restriction on the same. Tat, Eshaha, this, Slokaha, verse, Asti. This Upanishad says there is a sloka from the Upanishad to substantiate this view which I am proposing here. What is the view that is being proposed here? Let's see the next slide, please. Those who have sought not material gains, but sought the Atman through penance, which is a what kind of penance? Tapaha, the perseverance to think only of the higher Brahman. Faith, belief that this Brahman exists. And celibacy here is not celibacy, but to pursue this path of Brahman and substantiate this with the knowledge, with the meditation on that knowledge, they gain the proximity of the deity of sun. They travel through the northern route, meaning they are going through a different route compared to the general public who are going through progeny and gain material gains. They go to a state of liberation which is symbolized by the sun, which is called Devayana or the northern path. This is the home, the goal of all living creatures, the immortal state of realization and the fearless state that one has to gain. This is the highest goal that we can ever gain. From this, there is no return. It's not going to, we are not going to come back and fall again after that. For this is the end. There is a mantra that is going to follow this, is what the Upanishad postulates. Now, our discussion is, please understand, Prajapati himself manifested himself as the pair. So, he himself is the lower marga, he himself is the higher marga. So, both these options are available in all states of his creation. But the degree to which you can emphasize that will decide how you are able to elevate yourself to the thought process that the Upanishad is unfolding for us. According to Vedanta, the year itself is divided into two parts because the time span that is available to you in a year for you can make you decide what is your pursuit in this year. We all have these New Year resolutions, correct? Upanishad is telling, decide now what are the resolution you'd like to have for this year. It says you want to liberate, take the higher path. If you don't want liberation, continue with the lower path. Many forefathers have done it, you also will do it. Herd mentality, we call it. The duality of a year is actually equated to two lifestyles. One devoted to legitimate pursuit of material pleasure. It is not, you're not actually violating any rule to gain the material pleasures. It is normally acceptable practice. And the other is to engage in spiritual pursuit. The former is only material gains here and hereafterward, and the later is realizing the essence of one's life principle. And this is also discussed in Bhagavad Gita 8.24 and 24. So here, Upanishad says there are two choices for us. What kind of life we would like to have in our life. Many of us are conditioned by our forefathers, so we generally take the path of material. My dad told me material gain is important. Please go for a house, please go for a family, please go and get a good job. He never told me that Brahman is your goal. I think all of our parents would not have told us also, right? But if you, by the grace of Bhagwan, listen to Mahatma in your younger life or heard something here, that spark is in you, then this opens up. And once it opens up, you know what is the path. You require three qualities, which is penance, which is perseverance in the path, maintain that there is a goal which is believable, it's not visible to you, and you should have faith that you will reach it and continue to meditate on it, you will reach it, is what the Upanishad opens. Next slide, please. What are the mantras from the various Upanishads which are giving the same concept? Chandogya Upanishad, mantra 5.10, 1 and 2 say, those who know this about it's talking about Panchagni Vidya in Chandogya Upanishad. It says, those who know about these five fires and those who live in the forest practicing austerities with faith, they go after death. They are led by the deity of light, then they are led by the deity of the day, and then led by the deity of the bright fortnight, and then led by the deity of 6 months. And when the sun moves northward, they are led by the deity of the year, Samvatsara is mentioned here, and they are led to the deity of the sun, and that deity to the moon, and that deity to lightning, and there someone not in human form, meaning nothing to do with human gains and laws, will lead them to Brahmaloka. Basically, it's trying to tell you, you become subtler and subtler and subtler till this so-called identity with any BMI, whatever be subtle or great, is lost, and that is the path of the divine. That is what this mantra, Chandogya Upanishad, also postulates this Uttarayana Marga as the path of liberation. If you look into the next Upanishad, which is quoted in this particular Upanishad, next slide please. Can you move to the next slide? Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in mantra 6.2.15 also says the same thing. Those who know this as such, which this knowledge, and others who meditate with faith, this meditation aspect is from this Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, upon the Satya Brahman, that truth which you are, in a forest, meaning withdrawing yourself from all material pursuit, reach the deity identified with the flame, meaning fire principle, a knowledge principle, and from him the deity of the day, which is again sun, and from him the deity of the fortnight, which the moon waxes, meaning reflected light of the sun is also available in that. And from him the deities of the 6 months, in which the sun travels northward, and from that deity identified as the world of God, and from him to the sun, and from the sun to the deity of the lightning principle, then a being created from the mind, Hiranyagarbha, comes and conducts them to the world of Hiranyagarbha, which is known as Brahmaloka. They remain imperfect for many, many superfine years and do not return, is what the Upanishad postulates. So the substantiation of Prashtopanishad comes from both Chandogya Upanishad as well as the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Surprisingly, even in the Bhagavad Gita, this concept is mentioned. I'll bring it out. Next slide, please. In Bhagavad Gita 8.24 and 25, Agnir Jyotirahas Shuklah Sanmasa Uttarayanam Tatra Pratyeta Gachanti Brahma Brahma Vido Janaha. Fire, light, daytime, bright fortnight, 6 months of the northern solstice, followed by the path. Persons who are knowers of Brahman attain Brahman when they die. And it says, smoke night as also the dark fortnight and the 6 months of the southern solstice. Following this path, the yogi having reached the lunar returns. So that is the returning path. This is a non-returning path. This is a summary of Bhagavad Gita of what the concept which we saw in Prashtopanishad, Chandogya Upanishad as well as Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So all the Upanishad has been summarized in Bhagavad Gita in these two mantras. At the time of reading this mantra in Bhagavad Gita, if we did not know the Upanishad, we will be at loss. You know what does it say? They say you have to die in the first fortnight, so everybody wants to die between January and July. Wrong answer. It's not the times per se, it is trying to tell you that time concept has got two principles operating in it. And time in turn is representing your lifestyle, which is changing you continuously. Please change yourself by those activities which will uplift you towards the spiritual goal of your life, and don't waste your time in pursuing non-spiritual goal. So next time when you have this session, if there's an interruption, say this session is important. No, I'm kidding, don't worry. This is what you have to pursue things which are important to us. That is what Upanishad is trying to tell you. And those who do that reach the state of no return. Next slide, please. Then the Upanishad gives a graphic description. As it said, there's a shloka, right? That shloka is now coming up here to tell you how this principle of time is visualized in the Upanishad. Panchapadam Pitaram Dvadashakrutim Divaha Ahuhu Pare Adde Purishinam Ate Medanya U Pare Vichakshanam Sam Saptachakre Shadara Ahura Ahurarpita Nidhi. What it means is Panchapadam with 5 feet, Pitaram father, Dvadasha Akritihi with 12 forms, Divaha of the sky, Ahuhu the sages proclaim, Pare above, Arde half, Purishinam excreting, giving out rain, Atha again, Ime these sages, Anyevu many others, Pare above, Vichakshanam all wise, the knower the sun, Saptachakre 7 wheels, Chadare on 6-spoked chariot, Ahuhu say Arpitam placed iti thus. It looks as if it's a description of the journey of the sun. But hidden in this mantra is a lot of philosophical and philanthropical concepts which have to be understood. The sages say that the Lord of rain, sun is the Lord of rain, the Father, one who has created this entire variety of progeny by his pervasive nature, having 5 feet and 12 forms, is seated in a place higher than the atmosphere. So it is not available here, yet it is available here. That is what is meant here. Others call him all wise, the one upon whom, like a chariot drawn by 7 horses, running on a wheel with 6 spokes, the whole world is founded. Let's see this mantra a little bit deeper. Next slide, please. Some call him the Father with 5 feet, 12 forms. Here, what it is doing is that it says Son is omniscient, upon whom, like a chariot drawn by 7 horses running on a wheel with 6 spokes, the whole world is founded. Okay. It is glorifying the Son as Father of creation. Basically, it's trying to tell you, as far as we are concerned, we can visualize the Sun. Beyond that, Hiranyagarbha is a concept only. We cannot actually visualize it directly. The closest we can get to realizing that Hiranyagarbha principle is to understand the principle behind the Sun. And he says, visualize this Sun as having 5 feet. The first half of this mantra is giving a pen picture, Guru Puja Gurudev says, of a benevolent Lord. That this sacred Lord, who is actually Father of time, is conceived of having 5 limbs for his locomotion, known as the 5 seasons. Though in India we generally accept 6 seasons, here considering Hemanta and Shishira to be one, together as one, the Vedic mantra explains that the 5 seasons are the 5 feet of the Lord of Time. This is a poetic description. Vedas proclaim actually Shad Ritu and yet again call out Panchayata Ritaha. So in places, Vedas themselves give you both these types. And it has got 12 forms. Incidentally, if you look at the Puranas, Sun has got 12 names. Mitra, Ravi, Surya, Bhagan, Kagan, Pusha, Hiranyagarbha, Mariachi, Adityaha, Savita, Arkaha, Bhaskara, representing the 12 months. So each month, Sun takes on a new name associated in that month with a particular quarter of the journey in its sojourn into the revolution that it is going through for us. As a man walks with the help of his feet, Sun by means of the season seems to move along an orbit for us. And that is what is poetically mentioned in this particular Upanishad. The Sun is also compared to a chariot drawn by 7 horses, corresponding to the 7 colors of light, and moving on a wheel of time with 6 spokes, here now symbolizing the 6 seasons. So both the seasons concept of season are introduced in the single Upanishad. 6-cycle season as well as the 5-cycle season. Next slide, please. With this concept of time, I want you to just look at this picture for some time. I'm going to walk you through this very carefully. So far, what we understood is Brahman became Ishvara and Maya. That became the knower, experiencer, consumer, energy principle, and food, known, objects, and matter. That is what we saw. Then the secondary pair was energy, effulgence, sentient, moon, borrowed, effulgence, etc. And then time as a measure of activity, and then the northern and the southern activities which will liberate or bind us. So much we have conceived of. Now I'm going to walk you through what really happened in between. This is just a conjecture to get our intellectual thinking along the direction. For a moment, assume that you are Brahman. Okay. That means nothing exists other than you alone, correct? Only you alone exists. All pervading, north, south, east, west, up, down, only you, Brahman. Okay. Now, what is it you realize yourself to be? Brahman is postulated in the Upanishad as Satyam Jnanam Anantam, correct? Infinite, you are existing and you are knowing. The knowing principle is also belonging to you. So, if at all, if you want to do something, what would you do? Let me, I have a knowing power, let me know. That is will be what you will think, correct? Other than that, you cannot do anything. There's nothing else for you to act upon. So, this knowing principle is enacted by Brahman on itself, consisting of infinitude and existence. Right? So the knowing transfers itself into three parts: the known, the unknown, and the knowing in between. Correct? The known is Sat, Satya, existence. Unknown is Tamas, and in between is Rajas. So now Ishvara, along with Maya, which is consisting of the three gunas known as known, knowing, and the unknown, which is Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, created further pairs with these combinations. So you have this knower, experiencer, consumer, energy terms associated with the knowing. And that which is unknown becomes either food, known, objects, matter, etc. That manifests as energy, effulgence. As they start intermixing, you get more combinations, correct? So I, as Brahman, has transformed myself into this limited being today I am experiencing because of my association with this particular individual DM. What is my what is my true nature? I am the all-pervading director of this entire play, which consists of me alone, nothing else. It's a mono acting. And yet I have identified with a particular role. Like as a dreamer, even though the entire dream and the dreamer is you, you have a particular identity only with the dreamer. That is why we suffer in the dream. The same way, I forget that I am also everything else, but I have given a higher importance to my own limited understanding. Then starts all the activities in time. And these activities will either bury me further and further into this knowledge of misunderstanding, or it will elevate me from this to realize my true nature as Brahman. And that choice is yours. But you know what? I have inquired this concept thousand times. I've studied Brahman, I've studied Maya. There's no Upanishad that I have not read. Everything I know. I believe that this is inevitable. I will always be bound. There cannot be a liberation because it is also even that binding nature is coming from Brahman only, no? So it is also equally possible. The question is a mute question. It's like telling that I dream. But there are people who without dreams also, correct? So the desire to dream comes because of an unfulfillment in your experiences. If we directly go from waking to deep sleep, that means there is nothing in between. Every day we close the account and we sleep, we go to deep sleep. That means we have not felt incomplete in between, correct? In the same way, as long as we lead this life with the understanding that every instance is only a complete instance by itself, Purnam. It was complete before, it is complete now, it is going to be complete tomorrow also. And we go back into realizing